Hello. So the theme of this panel is the PE industry committed for real? And the first question, maybe to give a bit of context to Gilles, is we see now in the European Union agenda that sustainable finance is quite high and given quite a high priority, especially when it comes to private equity. Why do you think it's the case?
Well, good morning, everyone. So between 2014 2018, more than 300 billion were invested into EU companies by PE. This translates into some 25,000 companies that have benefited from these investments, and 84% were SMEs. In 2019, that was a record year, so another 94 billion were invested, so which is 8% above what happened the 5 previous years, and so it yet again went into SMEs, and so it signals that the investment by private equity into the real economy is massive. Now, integrating ESG factors into financial decisions, that's what it is about, because private equity houses, private equity managers, when they make investment decisions, invest into the real economy, these decisions should translate into finance that fosters sustainable economic, social and environmental development. And that ultimately should translate into a financial system that is more stable and that tackles the long-term social and environmental challenges that we see. So therefore, you know, PE and finance in general, they have a true role to play in the ESG, in the developing story.
So now we established that channeling PE money towards sustainable investments can really help the overall society, typically in Europe. Now the question is the private equity industry committed for real to do this?
I would say we don't really have a choice. So, but that's one angle to look at it. You've seen the very clear policy objectives that are coming from at EU level, international level. You know what is underway. And this is not going to go away anymore. I mean, ESG has been around for many, many years. I can remember talking about ESG and sustainable finance already 15 years ago. But it was a very niche topic. It was a sideshow for many. Some were definitely really onto it, but it has moved center stage. So now, how did it move center stage? I mean, first of all, and that is not new, it was pressure coming from investors. So if you take very large pension funds and other institutional investors, they are taking ESG seriously already for many, many years. And if you are a private equity manager, the due diligence requests will have very important ESG sections that really need to be taken seriously. So the pressure from investors will never go away. And remember, when we talk about pension funds, that we talk about all of us. So we are all already into this role. And then the second level of pressure is now definitely, surely, and certainly coming from regulation, because the European Union with the new Green Deal has put this yet again, I mean, at the very core of what the strategy is going to be over the next few years. And let's say regulation, you know, the industry would always say, well, but self-regulation, and we have been doing this, and yes, but, and because of the yes, but, and because of maybe not so much progress, and because this is so important, this is now moving center stage from a regulatory point of view, and there will be a before the new Green Deal, and there will be an after, and that's what we just started.
Okay, I think, being an investment director in infrastructure funds, I do agree that the initial pressure comes from some LPs. Obviously not all of them, but some guys like Sven Capital or the EIB put intense pressure, and they won't invest if you don't demonstrate a certain level of commitment to the ESG. Recently, I even had some investors clearly saying, if you don't have a certain rating at the UNPRI, well, we just won't invest. So that's quite important, because fundraising is the basis of the investment activity, obviously. But that does say there is a commitment to show you're doing something. It's not necessarily a real commitment of actually doing the work, in the operations, etc. And we have established that there is a commitment to demonstrate, but not necessarily to do.
Well, you know, the one thing is we don't have a choice. The industry doesn't have a choice. On the other hand, I would say the industry and ESG go very well together. And PE is generally about, I mean, some of the statements that I make are obviously very general because the private equity industry is so vast and diverse. But let's say they remain valid for a very, very, very large portion of the industry. And what PE is about is investing into businesses that are meant to be more successful and sustainable in the future. Because remember, I mean, in a base case, a PE manager will invest into a company, into a business, and will develop it. It's the buy, build, and sell strategy. So there is always the intention to develop and then to dispose of the investments at a gain, of course. Now, imagine making an investment decision today, not taking ESG into account, and you're going to dispose of that investment in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years from now. Do you think it's conceivable today that you can go into this without taking ESG into account at the start, during, and when you get closer to an exit? Because it is already very relevant today, but it will be even more relevant in the years to come. And then there's this reputational risk or risk element that we have seen in the past and that we may see many more times in the future.
I mean, the reputation risk, especially from OLP's point of view, is paramount. They don't want to see one of the fund managers they've invested in negatively in any newspaper. They are very sensitive to this, and we see that more and more in side letters. And I agree that in private equity, if you have a long-term horizon or long enough horizon, then you can really implement ESG actions. Some of these ESG actions may take 3-4 years to really create value, to really bear fruit. So you need to have this horizon, and probably private capital, private equity in general is best placed to do that. For us in infrastructure, obviously we invest over 10 years and we are in continuous relation with the public authorities or the general population that we serve. So we need really to be aligned. That being said, I have the feeling discussing with people that in private equity, other than infrastructure or in venture capital, that the level of preparedness, the level of preparation of the different players is quite diverse, and especially considering the new regulation, the disclosure, and then ultimately the taxonomy. I'm not sure everyone is at the same level or is ready to do that.
Well, that's it translates easily into heated debate. I remember of a number of discussions, let's say, amongst regulatory specialists about what should be done, what could be done, where should we go as faster or slower, etc. Now, there are these kind of 50 shades of green that are being mentioned all the time, be it negative screening to true impact investing. So it's not so much about that, because that, of course, is also very important. But it's about how can this now be integrated, and because how can this be integrated in existing operations? And when the at European level, when we were confronted with the first written texts about the regulations that are now underway, the industry was reacting because the industry was saying, okay, what does it mean? Do I need an ESG officer? Do I need an ESG team? Do I need to have somebody in risk management, in portfolio management, in compliance, in reporting? First of all, when we talk about the private equity industry, it's not that all the managers are large and they have ample resources. It's rather the opposite. Most managers in the industry are small with strapped resources. So therefore there was concern, and there is still concern as to how this will be implemented within the operations, because it's not something that can be switched on, but it has to be let's say to a certain extent and to a large extent, processes will have to be transformed, will have to be adapted. So there's a very important transformation exercise that will have to be undergone, and that comes at a certain cost. So, and that cost, of course, is also a source of concern. It's always a source of concern, first of all, when things are changing, and then when it's being when there's a cost associated to that, well, then you can get real opposition. But the industry is engaged in this process now, and we are seeing how this is filtering through at all possible levels. And there is not one solution, there's not one model, and because there are so many different models out there, we see the need to be adaptive and flexible at a time which is more like about inception.
But the fear there is, when we've gone through that for the past 10 years, ramping up and organizing ourselves in the investment team to integrate fully ESG in the operations, then ramp up on the voluntary frameworks like the UNPRI or for us the GRESB. And in terms of resources, it's still handled by the investment team. So far, we start to be quite stretched. And to be honest, if we want to claim that we are E and S with respect to the taxonomy, I don't think our team, as it is today, can do it. I don't think our compliance officer on herself can do it, or risk manager can do it on herself. So there will need to be extra resources. We are a team of 40, so having an extra person could be fine, but there are funds maybe that would struggle if they have to hire that's one of the thing. I know we have 3 years, more or less 2022, to prepare for all the regulation, but that could be quite stressful for some small managers. No?
Indeed, but let's say Luxembourg is a fund administration hub, a fund management hub. So we have about 300 authorized managers in the country, over 600 registered managers in the country. They all will have to confront this in one way or another. And we have some time. So it's over the next few years that this will come into play. But I remember when the AFMD came, the risk management function was in hot demand and still is. And so we are not yet at the end of the, let's say, the inception process to a certain extent of the entire regulatory framework. Now there's yet another challenge coming, which is about integrating ESG from a resources point of view. And I would expect that there will be many requests, and the demand side will not be satisfied when it comes to ESG officers and ESG expertise to be onboarded, but and there will be a lot of need for consulting and training going on. I mean, it's the process. So we're there, and we know that it's going to be tough for the smaller they are, and but the direction of travel is given.
So when you say the direction of travel is given, would you consider that ESG today in the private equity world? For me, it is in the infrastructure world, but is it something that is now mainstream? Can we qualify it as mainstream?
I mean, if I, and maybe we can close with that because we're also running out of time. If I ask my colleagues who've been doing impact investing over the last 10 years, they will clearly say ESG is mainstream now. And I would say that this is only the end of the beginning, and so there's a lot more to come from where we are today.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we are on time.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the room? Yep, all the way at the back. Anne-Marie. I think you need the mic, Anne-Marie. No, you take it. Yep. We're not sharing mics.
So Gilles, I wanted to ask the question, how important will the G become, especially in private equity? Would it mean that PE managers will take board positions in any investment company they may do in the future?
It's a very good question. I personally think that the G is already there. And so when we talk about the taxonomy, we're now with the E, but I think the G is there, has been there from the beginning. The G is there already for a number of years, and it's kind of the overarching, it's the glue that keeps it all together. And now, there are different types of managers out there, but you have, of course, if you buy a business, many managers will take a very active role, and maybe going into the management will certainly have a consulting role, an active role, and there are different levels of governance here. I mean, there's the governance, first of all, at the fund management side, and that has been a big topic of the last few years, will never go away. And then there's the topic about the target businesses, and I think at the level of the target businesses, indeed, it will just translate into more transparency, better governance, maybe with the help from the outside, maybe from the inside. But it's the G, I think, is already there, and the G is center stage.
If I can shortly complement, for instance, in our case, we would have always board seats, often even the majority of the board seats in our companies. And the G is also translated below in the organization of the companies in all the policies. It can be the business ethics, the code of conduct, making sure that you have the proper whistleblower policy. Because again, especially when you work with SMEs, all those things usually don't exist. So you have to put in place all those processes to make sure that the G is well handled also at that level. And of course, control it is.
Do we have any other final question? No? I think that we can close. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much.